welcome to this edition of Stray and Hammy Talks. This is going to be the first of two segments detailing our thoughts on the Cowboys' upcoming draft. So we're going to start off by mocking the entire first three rounds. Go.
Nice.
No.
They make a pick at 18, and then they go make another pick.
Well, I'm talking about the entire draft. No, I'm
Oh, okay.
Before we get started talking about individual players, though, I wanted to kind of get an idea of how we all are going to sort of prioritize our picks. Are you guys thinking best player overall that's available on your board, or do you pick the best player available for your specific need?
Well, I personally think that in the way the NFL has kind of changed over the last 3 or 4 years, the cap hasn't grown. It's getting harder and harder to hold on to your good players as they come into their second contracts, kind of like what happened with the Cowboys with Anthony Spencer. Here they had to make a really, really tough choice, and it really took a big cap hit. So I think now, as much as everybody says draft your board, well, you can't draft your board if you got DeMarcus Ware and you draft another pass rusher. If you're not going to, like, say you have Ware and Spencer and you lock up Spencer long term, you can't then go draft another pass rusher.
If that's your board.
Yeah, if that's your board. You've got to get, unless he's an inside pass rusher, you can't draft another outside guy. You've got to draft for need some. And because of the cap, you need cheap, good players who are starters on your team. So while depth is important, you need guys who are playing above their contracts. And the only way to do that now is to get starters out of the first, 3 to 4 rounds in the draft every year.
And I agree with that as far as how it applies to the Cowboys, but I disagree in overall strategy. And what I mean by that is take a look at the Patriots and the Packers. They've been drafting best available players for years. And what that's done has allowed them to have depth at those positions. And if, say, Matt Castle is a guy that's drafted and is really not going to see the field, well, then you trade him and you get a second-round pick for him. Or Ryan Mallett, who's a potential trade bait. So they draft the best available players, even though they may not fit right away, with the idea that either they're going to play or they're going to be traded for good value in return. And that's why you see the Patriots with 12 good picks every year. It's not like they have their 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8 7th-round picks. Mm-hmm. I mean, they trade players for good picks. And so I think that's the overall strategy you want, but because of how the Cowboys drafts have failed, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, the 2006 to 2010 drafts have netted them 3 players. Well, now you have to draft for need. I mean, you can't just take the best available player and sit him behind Spencer and Ware for however long Ware retired.
See, I don't know if I necessarily even agree with your assessment of what the Patriots do. I think they do that in maybe rounds 3 through 7, but there's been a lot of first rounds in the last couple of years where they've gone after a linebacker or a defensive back because they needed a linebacker or a defensive back. So, I mean, you can say that overall their draft strategy is to draft the best available player, but when they drafted the linebacker out of USC, they needed a starting linebacker right now.
Yeah.
And I don't know that he was the best player on the board. He was a good player. And he's turned out to be a solid NFL player for them, but he's not, just a drop dead stud.
No, and I agree with that. I mean, I think they certainly do pick for need when it's that big of a need.
Yeah.
And they went to the Super Bowl with the 31st ranked defense, and they said, "Wow, we need to improve our defense."
Yeah.
And they drafted the linebacker, and I think they took their top 3 picks that year were
defensive players,
starting defensive type players. Cornerback, they got Devin McCourty, the linebacker, and the defensive lineman. So, yeah, I mean, I think they definitely do, but they also fit those guys, the depth guys, throughout the years and piece them together when they don't necessarily have a big need. So they're in a position that maybe the first round they get your starter, but the second round you can get the best available or whatever. So
Yeah, and the
That's
Cowboys.
the general idea that you want. The Cowboys are not in position to do that.
No, they need 3 starters out of their first 4 picks this year, and they need that. They needed it last year, and they needed it.
And I think we've discussed this together, but I think that there's 2 positions that I think we agree that they can get a starter on in the first 3 rounds. Interior or offensive line and defensive line. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter. I think defensive tackle is what we're looking at. Mm-hmm. But then offense, I think you're looking at a tackle or a guard. I think they can find 2 stars there for sure. If you go to the 3rd round, I think you could either find the other offensive line or a safety that could start. Maybe in the 4th round, I think there's still potential. So I think the Cowboys have so many needs, but there is also some depth at the positions that the Cowboys have needs in this year's draft. They should be able to find 3 to 4 starters in this year's draft if they're smart about it.
So drafting for need is not, is not a death sentence in this draft.
No,
correct. What is your philosophy on drafting in the NFL?
I'm kind of a more draft for need guy, which is a little more interesting because I follow baseball more. So in baseball, you always should draft the best available no matter what. But in the case of football, and especially the Cowboys this year, I definitely think they need to draft for need. But it's kind of a combination this year. I think find out what you need. So obviously we decided they need interior linemen both on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. Whichever of the best players at either one of those positions comes up according to your board, you draft that guy first. So if it's like Sheldon Richardson as a defensive tackle, you draft him first. If Cooper for some odd reason slips, then pick him up. And then the next round, go for the opposite position. So if you get an offensive tackle in the first round, go for a defensive tackle in the second round, and then try to fill. So if you get an offensive tackle at 18, maybe at 80, assuming the Cowboys don't trade down, which is. I think they're going to end up trading down or trading up. It's Jerry Jones. He loves to trade.
Well, and the way the rookie caps or rookie salaries are done now, it's easier to trade. So Jerry likes to trade anyways. Now it's easier to do that. I can definitely see him trading.
And this is kind of my plan. You've got 6 picks in this draft. You don't have a 7th round pick, which okay, I'll take Ryan Cook in his backup center bag over a 7th round pick. Right now, he's a serviceable player, so not, just furious at that trade. But I think you can't afford to trade down in this draft unless you're dropping 6 picks for an additional 3rd or something like that. Like if you're getting a quality pick and still, getting a player in the same quality that you would have gotten, it's worth it to me. I think a lot of teams are going to be trying to trade down this year around the Cowboys area. So I think the price is going to be driven down, and I think the amount of spots that you're going to have to drop is going to be driven up. So if you're dropping 10 spots, which puts you in a different tier of player for a 4th round pick or a 5th round pick, something like that, to me, I don't want to hear it at all.
Right.
Or a future pick, I don't want to hear it. This Cowboys team needs 3 to 4 players out of this draft because they don't have resources in free agency to fill the holes that they have. Right now, like you said, they need to say they don't get an offensive lineman in the 1st round, which would be their main need on offensive line. So they end up with a Sheldon Richardson, which I will applaud all day.
Yeah.
That does mean that in the 2nd round, they need to look at the offensive line. They can't pick another defensive player unless that player is a safety, which is another need of theirs. Right. So because you have to have such a narrow-minded focus, and if you do push offensive line to the 3rd round, everybody's going to be nervous about what type of player you're going to get because you have some real issues on your offensive line. Which I think we're going to get into a little later.
Right.
But you have to fill your needs this year and get quality players at value of their positions. You're asking a lot of yourself. So you really can't afford to – I don't think you can afford to trade down and just say, okay, we'll add another – maybe we can add another quality player in the 3rd round for dropping – 10 or in the 4th round, you can't afford the maybes this year. You've got to get quality guy, quality guy, quality guy. And I think the best way to do that is to stay where you are. You can't trade up and give up a guy, and you can't trade back and hope on a guy.
I agree with one exception, and the likelihood of this exception is very rare, so I don't expect it to happen. But if the top 4 tackles, Fisher, Jokel, Johnson, and Fluker are off the board, Warmack, Cooper, and Sheldon Richardson and Sylvester Williams are off the board.
And Sharif Floyd.
Well, he's a top 5 pick.
Yeah.
So if all those guys are off the board, maybe you can try to see about a trade down situation. I don't trade down more than 4-5 spots tops. Problem is that trade's not going to happen.
Yeah,
nobody's going to trade up 4 spots in that area of the draft and give up a 3rd round pick to do it.
I could see it if there's a player that they just want, but the problem is you're not going to get the same value as you would in previous drafts because I think more teams will be trying to trade out of those middle round picks if the scenario you're talking about goes, because the skill players aren't there this year.
The value is not there, right?
And so that's the other problem. We all bag on Jerry all the time for, he gets a gleam in his eye for skill players. So does every other general manager in football. They all love, and the Steelers are really good at building inside out. Patriots are really good at building inside out. Giants are really good at building inside out. But every GM goes corner, receiver, running back, quarterback. Oh my God. That's a stop. Those are stop down positions. Middle linebacker. Those are stop down positions that they'll go, okay, there's a guy that we really like here who's fallen. He's a value. Let's move up to get that guy. Or left tackle. Although left tackle less than it has been in the past due to the changing nature of pass offenses. But I don't see those real value positions in where the Cowboys are. So I don't think they're going to be able to command as much as they have been in the past. I say stand pat, don't overthink it this year, and draft really, really good players and players you need. You're already asking a lot of yourself. Don't then make it harder by adding another hoop to jump through by trading back.
Right. And I agree completely, but it is the Cowboys and you never know. So
Jerry's going to be looking a deal. I just if I got to say one sentence, if I got to say one sentence to Jerry Jones before this draft,
don't trade.
I would say don't trade, draft players you need, and for God's sakes, look at Jason Garrett before you make a pick.
So we're approximately 72 hours away from the Cowboys being on the clock.
Yeah.
Give or take an hour. You're there at 18. What are you looking at? Where do you go? Who are players you're watching? What are you thinking about?
Yeah, and we've been through a lot of this, and I've actually the draft board has kind of changed directions and has been pretty upsetting because early in the process, a lot of those skill guys were higher up boards, and so the big guys were getting pushed back, and I'm still hoping that can happen on draft day because historically that's what happens. This many offensive linemen don't go early. But right now we're talking 5-6 offensive linemen before the Cowboys pick at 18, which is unheard of. And so if that happens, Sheldon Richardson's probably there. There are boards though where all the nightmare scenario you were laying out is there, and even Kenny Vaccaro's gone, who's been talked about at 18. If that happens, I've got a couple of guys. Sylvester Williams should be there. I've even DJ Fluker should be there. I've seen him going as high as, what do we see him as high as 12?
Yeah,
which is insane. And Vaccaro, I've seen
McShay from ESPN had him at 12.
And I've seen Vaccaro as high as 12, which seems crazy because, like you said,
Dolphins. I mean, sorry.
Yeah, because guys that aren't high interception guys, real game-changing safeties don't go that high, but the dearth of skill players has kind of pushed him there. I've actually seen Chance Warmack fall down more boards than I have Jonathan Cooper, even though he's, I think, thought of as he could go higher than Cooper in some scenarios. Some people grade him better, but I've seen him fall down more boards than I have seen Cooper. I've seen Cooper pretty solid, around anywhere from 9 to 13. And so I think the chances of Cooper getting to us are slim.
And I think it's they're both considered top starting guards. It's just different skill sets.
Yeah.
Cooper is considered the more athletic, better footwork guy. He's going to be your pulling guard that's going to get out in the open space. Warmack is more of the solid
road
mover,
type,
road grader. And so both of them are starting quality, but that's why Warmack's falling, is because he's not as athletic as Cooper. But to that point, it doesn't mean he's not a quality starter. So
yeah, if either one of those guys is available at 14,
it takes 2 seconds to put the card in.
Yeah.
At 14?
At 14.
At 14?
Do you trade? Think about trading up?
If both of them are available now. Because
one
then
of them.
If one of them's available,
That's
one
fine.
guy's already been picked and one guy's available, I think it still depends on who's left. If Sheldon
think a guard's
Richardson's, if Sheldon Richardson's there or Sylvester Williams, I think you certainly just say no. We'll take our shot with one of those guys instead of wasting the pick. Like you said, I mean, stay put, make a pick. You'll get a starter, and then there's still potential. In the
And
second
this is
round
how
to
much
fill
I
that
believe in
need.
that.
I agree.
If that nightmare scenario goes down, and I think in the nightmare scenario, I think Williams is there. I think Sheldon Richardson may even be there. But say that those two guys are even gone, I stay at 18 and I pick Eric Reed. And I feel bad about it. It's a reach. I'm not happy about the value that I got, but I know I got a guy who's going to start on my football team. And that's what I need this year. And if I trade back and I get a guy that's not a guaranteed starter in a position of need, because I traded back and the draft order still didn't work out for me.
Which we've seen that happen.
Yeah, and that has happened, and it's just not worth it. If the Brady Quinn trade happened again, and the Cowboys were trading out of the first round for, what did they get, a third that year and a first the next year or something, or was it a second and a first?
I think they got the second of that year.
Yeah, they were moving down like 10 spots, and they got the first round pick next year.
Yeah.
That's a great trade. You do that every time. I don't do it this year. Because you need starters on your football team.
So you're going with Eric Reed 18 if the nightmare scenario happens.
Yeah, which I can't think
And,
of.
and I'm with you. I think the guys that are not going to be there are the top 3 tackles: Johnson, Jokel, and Fisher. I mean, I think those guys are gone. I think Cooper is gone. But I think there's a high possibility that DJ Fluker and Chance Warmack are both available, and Sheldon Richardson and Sylvester Williams. And I think if that's the case, I think Chance Warmack's your pick, but I think you'd be happy with any of those 4. I think Sylvester Williams is probably the lowest on my list, but if he's there and none of those others are, you take him.
And this is the biggest conundrum of in Cowboys draft history to me. If I'm in the war room, because I love Sheldon Richardson, and I think he fits in your defense and is dominant in your defense. Not dominant, possibly dominant in your defense from day one. And I think your guards are okay.
Serviceable.
Yeah, serviceable. Not good. And Bernardo grades terribly, but just me watching him week to week, I never say Bernardo's the reason you're losing. I say, man, I wish that Bernardo was a little better. And so Warmack may do that. If the unimaginable happened and Lane Johnson fell or just something crazy happened with a tackle, I'd say, okay, no doubt. But having to pass on Sheldon Richardson for a guard hurts. But you probably need to do it.
Well, I think if those guys are there, and I think they will be there, so I think they're going to have options. I know everybody's talking about those guys being drafted higher and how great these guys are. David Castro was a top 10 pick last year in all the pre-draft rankings.
And he went 21 or
24 to the
24,
Steelers.
yeah.
So this is a guy that everybody talked about as a surefire 10-time Pro Bowl guard.
Yeah, guards fall.
And he fell.
Yeah.
And this year, there's 2 of those guys. So there's no way, in my opinion, that both of those guys get drafted before the Cowboys pick. One of them I could absolutely see because there are options, but two of them I doubt it.
But if there's a year for it, it's this year.
And the reason is because of the skill positions, like
Yeah.
you addressed earlier, is that there's just not a lot of dirt for those guys. So I'm with you there. I think Williams is probably the guy in the nightmare scenario, but even if he's not there, Eric Reed still seems like a reach for me, and I would consider a trade down. But I still think at 18, if that real nightmare situation happens, that pick on Eric Reed is not the value. And then I do go, who's the best player available? And to me, it's Tyler Eifert at that point. If he, even if he's still there, I've seen mocks that have him going in the top 15. But I think, you don't have a need for a tight end, but if you can get Tyler Eifert because none of those other guys are there, I think that's a better pick than Eric Reed.
And I agree with you, and I'm in love with Eifert, but
got to get your starter right now.
But I need a starter.
I hear it.
He's not taking snaps from Witten, and James Hanna's a good player. So you have two deep at that position. Now, James Hanna's not Tyler Eifert.
Right.
But James Hanna will make plays for you. I'm set at tight end right now.
But I also feel that Eric Reed will probably be available in the second round. So...
Yeah, but I want to get... I got to get big in the second round.
You got to address the other need.
Yeah. Well, and so going on to the second round, I think there's a few names that we've talked about. Larry Warford from Kentucky. Warfork. That's a hard name to say.
Mm-hmm. And he's...
I think... And it all depends on the first round, like you just said.
Yeah.
Whoever you get in the first round is going to dictate who they go for in the second round. I think Eric Reed is a guy to look at in the second round, but he may or may not be there at 49. Warfork is the same way. He may or may not be there at 49, but he would be a great guard to get. I think there's 3 linemen that would help him. Only one... Oh, there's more than that, but Kawan Short, he may or may not be there at 49. He may go in closer to 40. I've heard DeMontre Moore and Alex Okafor, but they would be depth guys, not starter guys. They would be behind Ware and Spencer, and I'm not sure. I like them, but that's more of a if you don't think you're going to work anything out with Spencer.
Yeah, if you draft those guys, you're basically saying
we're not working
out a long-term deal with Spencer.
And a couple other guys' names, Jonathan Hankins. He's a huge defensive tackle out of Ohio State, and
he's playing your one.
Right,
yeah.
One technique, and then another one technique is Jesse Williams, the other big nose tackle or defensive tackle out of Alabama.
Yeah, I mostly saw him going. I think a little later in the 50s. I may be wrong.
Either way, those are guys that you could consider, and they would be one technique starters. I think most of the other defensive tackles we had talked about would be 3 techniques.
And I really like Jesse Williams.
He's a beast.
Yeah,
he's 340 pounds.
I couldn't believe he dropped like
athletic.
he did.
Yeah.
Because even if
he
you
has
have
low sack totals, and that was pretty much it. He's not.
You're playing a one technique, yeah.
Yes, he's a one technique and a 4-3 Tampa 2. You don't need him to be.
Yeah, and I have all the same guys. This is why you don't want me to be your general manager, because I'm nervy as all get out right now. I take Barrett Jones in the second round if he's there and the center guard situation doesn't work. But he could be a late third round pick,
and I like him in the third round.
Yeah,
but if none of these other guys are there, I'd take him in the second. I think that highly of him. I know he's got the injury that he's coming off of, and that's probably the only reason I can think of that's pushing him down. But I think talent wise, he's a first round talent.
Yeah,
I mean he was an All-American, an All-SEC player at 3 positions on Alabama's line, and he was the center of a line that's going to turn around and give you DJ Fluker and Chance Warmack in the first round of this draft. And he led those guys.
If you do trade down with your first round pick, which I hate, but if you do trade down, your best case scenario would be you get like a Sylvester Williams type, Eric Reed type in the first round. You get, you get your Jonathan Hankins in the second, and in the third round, if you could pull off, Rambo Barrett Jones combo, then all of a sudden you've stacked talent, and that trade down's worth it. But it's just so scary.
Yeah.
And this year, when you need players, you would have to be and I guess if anybody is, it's Jerry Jones because he's got no fear for his job. You would have to be. I mean, you'd have to have some marbles down there to make that.
Well, and I think if we're going to go into the third round a little bit, Benny Logan is a defensive tackle at LSU that I've seen
We are on the money right now.
A lot of interest in him from the Cowboys, from the scouting department, and he's a guy that if you miss on interior defensive linemen in the first or second round, this is a guy in the third round that could come in and start for you.
Yeah.
I mean, would you rather have one of the other guys? Sure. But this is a guy that if you miss on the first 2 rounds, you can say, I can go get Benny Logan.
Yeah, I can say that, and Benny Logan's probably a good pick, but I think he's probably ends up being a depth pick because is he going to beat out Ratliff and Hatcher?
True. But Hatchers and Ratliff are also in their 30s, early 30s, but...
Well, Ratliff's pretty close to done.
It could be
no
a
matter
guy
what the
that
Cowboys say.
He would be a rotational guy that 2 years from now, maybe your starter.
But that's not bad in the third round. The guy I love in the third round is Travis Frederick, who is not a great... the knock on him is he's not great in the shotgun, he hasn't been great in the shotgun because he didn't run it in Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. I feel like most guys can learn that aren't Andre Giroux. But I feel like most guys can learn that, and I also feel like a bad snap every now and again with Romo's now.
But he could also play guard, so it's not like you would be getting a guy that was limited to center who has never done.
And I love offensive linemen from Wisconsin, especially high achievers at offensive line in Wisconsin. I think this guy is a day one starter at either center or guard, and that's why I love the Barrett Jones idea, and I love the idea of Frederick because you have a giant hole out at right tackle, which you have to fix, but there's no right tackles really fit where you're drafting other than possibly DJ Fluker. Mm-hmm. But you also have a deficiency like a talent deficiency between your guard and center position. And your center position maybe because that guy's just injured all the time. Costa just couldn't play last year.
Right.
Because when he did play, he played well. But I love the idea of being able to go into training camp and say, okay, Bernardo, Costa, here's a new guy. You have 3 spots. This new guy's getting one of them. You two figure it out. Because I think that the competition level with the added talent just really improves what you're going into the season with.
I think also in the third round, going back to the tackle, Dallas Thomas from Tennessee, he's a guy that I think could, if not start, he could seriously push for the starting right tackle. So that in the first 3 rounds, we've addressed guys that I think we'd be happy with any of those picks, and I think they would all be, if not day one starters, they would push very hard to be starters. And I think there's a couple of guys that might be rotational on the defensive tackle, but that's fine because you're going to be rotating guys in and out. So they're, even if they don't start snap 1, they're getting significant minutes. So I think if that's how the first 3 rounds go, I think we're good. And then, we'll take a look at the remaining rounds coming up and some other things to look for in the draft here in part 2 of the segment.
Let's turn your car into a hovercraft and see what happens.